Welcome back everyone to yet another episode of What's Up Startup. Today we have with us Mr. Sanachit Mehra, founder of Catenia Technologies. He is an alumnus of IIT Roorkee and has been working in the tech space for the last 6 years. So without much ado, we'll get started. Sir, if you could please tell our viewers a little about what Catenia does.
So we are a 4-year-old company now. We were born on Feb of 17, and we started off as a purely IT services company. The first project that we did was with Yes Bank. So we helped them build a supply chain finance platform on blockchain. So this platform essentially enabled them to connect vendors and consumers to blockchain services, and ended up also ensuring that the payment process could be automated through smart contracts. Now, since then, we've done work in banks and insurance companies in India and other markets, and primarily I've enabled different consortiums to set up, let's say, circular economies among them. So, of late, our focus in India has been with the larger private banks. So right now we are in the process of enabling them with the next phase of open banking through APIs or blockchain. We do a lot of process digitization through our tech platform on one side, and also we do also have our own cloud-based offerings for not just banks or insurance companies, but even let's say upcoming startups who would want to set up a shop. So we have platforms which would enable them to set up a fintech from scratch. So from the very beginning, we positioned ourselves as a tech fin rather than a fintech, which means that we are tech heavy. We don't really have a financial proposition. We don't really have any financial licenses as well. So we are more tech enablers, and we help companies to build on top of our stack. So, and yeah, so that's how we like I said, we started off as an IT services company. We've since diversified. We do have an IT services arm still, but we do have a host of products in the fintech and insurtech range. And for us, I think the next step going forward is probably going to scale up some of our products, obviously, and also look at different markets.
All right, that's a really wonderful thing, sir. And this is the first time I've heard something that is called as a tech fin company, because rather than taking the load less travel like you did, most of them brand themselves as a fintech company.
Yeah.
So, and sir, I would also like to congratulate you and your organization on being featured as the top 10 firms in India that are paving the way for the future of blockchain. So, sir, so there is this buzz about Bitcoin and or the technology behind it, that is blockchain. So, how would you describe blockchain to a layman?
Okay, so I think since everybody here already knows Bitcoin, and I think the one thing behind Bitcoin is not blockchain. The thing behind Bitcoin is actually Vela people sitting at the home and driving prices up. So that's the one big thing behind Bitcoin. That is one thing behind Bitcoin. Then also I think that's the one big thing behind the Sensex as well. But having said that, as far as blockchain is concerned, you should probably think of it as a database which is not maintained by a single entity. And again, so this is a loosely thrown out concept, right? So a lot of people talk about blockchain being distributed database that anybody can write to. It's entirely trusted, and the records can't be tampered. And I think it's a very trivial description because distributed technologies already do it, right? So if among your friends you already have somebody who uses AWS, for instance, right? So, and if they want to provision a new database, that one single database might actually be a sharded instance of a larger ecosystem, right? So having distributed computing in place for financial applications is not something new. Okay, so we have to definitely get that out of our mind. In fact, in production systems across the world, you never actually have a single, a database which is going to be the master for all your records. You're probably going to have multiple databases, which means that the description of blockchain as a distributed database is not entirely correct. So we need to add something more to it. Okay. So the next recipe then is, okay, it's a shared database, and by sharing we mean that multiple organizations have access to the database, which is okay. I think we are getting there somewhat, but it still doesn't capture everything. And what it does not capture is this idea behind consensus. So, and this is getting more into the tech needs right now, but as far as databases are concerned, or rather your SQL databases are concerned, your transactions are typically atomic, which means that a transaction either happens or it doesn't happen. There's no middle state, so to speak. So even with multiple instances of a single database, you would know that a transaction has actually happened or not, which is not really true for your typical distributed systems, where a transaction could have one value in one system, something else in another system, and this could be because of network latencies or because of some malware, n number of things.
Right.
The one very cool thing that a blockchain can do is give you 100% ironclad guarantees that the data that you have in your version of the data store is the same everywhere. And this is essentially what the consensus is, right? So essentially every single organization in a network consents, or rather is in agreement with the current state of the database. And this is something very powerful. It immediately opens up the gates to immediately new kinds of business models, so to speak. I mean, I like to think, so again, so if you were to ask me, I like to think of blockchain as the next logical iteration for the cloud. So if you go to AWS today, you can obviously get SLAs on service uptimes, you can get databases, and AWS will tell you that they are going to guarantee 99% uptime, and they're going to manage your database and your functions and everything. But at the end of it, it's still AWS that's doing it, or it could be Azure, or it could be Google, or n number of other cloud vendors. It's still a single organization. What blockchain gives you is so much more powerful. I mean, you immediately enter into an ecosystem where you can now host your entire cloud computing needs on a wider network, and there is no single entity that is responsible for this uptime. So you're not really tightly bound to one service provider. Right. So in that sense, I actually like to think of blockchain as a distributed, decentralized cloud. And so this is also what Ethereum started off as. So their vision is to build the global computer, right? And you do this by having multiple service providers, and that's exactly how I like to think of it as well.
Wow, so that's a really wonderful explanation, and I'm sure our viewers would certainly appreciate being the concepts explained so wonderfully. So sir, my next question is that, like every cloud, there is a concern about safety, and even increased in the and this concern is increased in the when we talk about financial assets. So how do you, and also I was reading some news where it mentioned that hackers have stolen about $2 billion in the last 2 years from cloud or Bitcoin related services or assets. So sir, how would you say that this concern can be addressed or should be addressed?
So I think the one key ingredient that people generally miss out on descriptions about systems getting hacked is, why would they get hacked? So, and again, there are a lot of moving components to this as well. So even in the blockchain ecosystem, so there is the one, or rather the few ecosystems, or rather the few components which could get hacked are A, the consensus algorithm itself, B, the algorithms which ensure that your data gets hashed or your data gets stored or recorded on the blockchain, and finally C, the mechanism by which you actually end up encrypting your information, and finally your encrypting keys as well, right? So these are different components, and each of these is responsible for ensuring secrecy and privacy and safety. Now, as far as the protocols are concerned, so not just Bitcoin, but pretty much every single blockchain that I have seen and again, there are not too many. I think I probably know of 3-4 technologies at max. But the technology that I have seen, they use pretty standard encryption algorithms, and these are all open source algorithms, which means that anybody can look at the protocol and they can verify and they can read and verify for themselves that this technology works, right? And that is I'll say the first litmus test of any good encryption algorithm. It has to be open source. Everybody has to know how the protocol works. So it's true for the 3-4 odd blockchains that I have seen, that the protocols are open source. The hash generation algorithms are open source. Anybody can check and verify how they work.
Right, sir.
So this means that that Bitcoin or any other blockchain out there is provably secure as far as we are concerned about the storage of the data. So if you want to have tamper-proofness of records, I think in those scenarios, blockchains are pretty secure. Now, where the hackers are actually able to get a leverage on is the wallets. So typically, the hacking happens at wallets. This happens, and again, this is even more simple for them when your encryption keys are directly available with the service provider, right? So, and I'll give you an example here. So let's say I want to interact with a blockchain. So to interact with the blockchain, there are 2 ways of doing it. The first is a low-level way in which you have your own blockchain server, which is a node connected to the network, and the node talks to the rest of the network through RPC, right? So it's a low-level messaging protocol that it uses to talk to the wider network. So you have your server, and the server has your encryption key, and you secure your encryption key using either hardware security modules, or maybe you don't actually store it on a server and you use that key, you commit it to memory and you use it every single time you have to sign some transaction, right? Now the second way to interact with the blockchain network is by connecting a client device, it could be a mobile app or a web application, to a node and talking to the node over a REST API call, and the node finally talks to the rest of the network through an RPC. Right? And this is a typical web application structure, right? Where the node exposes REST APIs, the node probably the node along with the middleware is also responsible for signing transactions. Now, in a lot of the scenarios, and this is true of a lot of crypto trading platforms. So a lot of crypto trading platforms over the last 2 or 3 odd years, the way they've structured this is to A, host their own node, and B, to also host the encryption keys on behalf of their customers, which means that let's say if I host a crypto trading platform and you want to talk to some blockchain, you are going to end up storing your encryption key with my platform.
Right.
So the only platform or the only server or the only appliance that a hacker needs to target is mine, and they just have to gain access to my server or my file system. And if those components are not secured, then I have access to all encrypting keys, and I can basically hack anything there.
Right.
So this means that it's not really the underlying blockchain protocol which is vulnerable to hacking. It's actually the cloud security. So it's a typical cloud security which is mismanaged on a lot of platforms. So I think that's true of pretty much every single DAO attack or hacking that we've seen over the last couple of years, that encryption keys were pretty much stored as a honeypot. There was some attack, the servers were not really secure, and the hackers gained access to encryption keys. And again, more than that, encryption keys getting stored as clear text, I think that's the mother node of all sins out there in technology. So that happens more frequently than I would wish to tell you, but yeah, it's still true. So these are more problems related to how people end up building their technology stacks on cloud than problems associated with blockchain, the protocol itself.
All right, sir. And thank you so much for explaining it so wonderfully. And so now that we're on the topic of technology and how it is easing our lives, what are your views about AI, and how can it be linked in and be a wonderful part of our lives, make our lives easier, not only in everyday use but also specifically to the financial services that we undertake?
So, as far as AI is concerned, I'm actually a skeptic. I am a skeptic since the day my Echo Dot device suddenly in the middle of the night started laughing. So that's one thing which is pretty creepy. And I make it a point to always, switch it off whenever I'm sleeping, because there are things that you do at night. Now, having said that, I think we don't really have to discuss about the tipping point for AI and how it's going to change our life, because I think we've already reached that tipping point and we've crossed it as well. So things like I said, things like the Echo Dot or Siri, they're already a part of our lives. In fact, more than we would want to care, every single post that you read on Facebook or every single advertisement that you get to see on YouTube, whether you want to watch it or not, is all driven by AI these days. So, so this is something which is already being used by large organizations in production. I think it's also about how easy it is going to be for common consumers to be able to train their own models, A, and B, how do you ensure that something that you build which is personalized and private is also not going to become a threat for you. I think I became an AI skeptic when I first saw the movie Animatrix. I don't know if you've seen it, and this is it has a lot of stories, and one of them is a prelude to the actual Matrix series, and it shows how human beings created robots and how they ended up being gods, and then they crushed the robots like slaves, and how they rebelled again. And this might actually be a very scary future for us, which means we actually even have to look at the ethical aspects of how we end up using this thing. Right. So there are models out there which not just understand language, or rather which don't just read language. So there are natural language learning protocols, but there are also natural language understanding protocols. So that is a more deeper, nuanced algorithm than we typically know of. So in those cases, I think we actually have to be very concerned, as citizens, as to how we want our data to get consumed, and B, who is the end beneficiary of the data that we are generating. So we do see out there, courses around building AI models are getting cheaper. In fact, building models is getting cheaper. In fact, it's getting a lot easier nowadays. You can even have a low-code approach to building your own AI or ML model. So a total lay person can just go to some website and they can drag and drop a few components, and they'll be able to build their own model. So it's getting pretty easy, but I think we still haven't really figured out as to what the implications are of having an entirely no-holds-barred approach to sharing our data, building something which might end up being a black box knowledge repository. So I think those are implications that we really have to be concerned about. I think the benefits already, or at least currently, the benefits outweigh the downsides. But as far as the future is concerned, I think we need to be more nuanced around how we are going to share our data as well.
Right, sir. And I, for one, am very impressed and very happy with my Echo. My Echo does not laugh in the middle of the night. So I for one, am keeping my fingers crossed that it does not overpower us in the future. And now, sir, moving from the technical side of questions to the entrepreneurial side of questions. So you mentioned that your organization is now 4 years old. So, but if we go back a little in time, and would you be able to tell our viewers what made you decide and what made you take the first step, how the entrepreneurial bug actually bit you, and what was your idea behind starting your own venture?
Yeah, I'll actually say I don't, and again, as much as I hate to admit it, I don't really have a very nuanced answer to that. My answer would be, मेरे को नौकरी नहीं करनी. ठीक है. So that's been my entire motivation always. I started my career as an assistant professor. So I used to teach management at the state IIIT Andhra, and about a year and a half into this, I basically lost interest. And since then, again, and I've had jobs. I did work as a middleware engineer, and I did do a lot of work again as an employee for multiple banks, say from, let's say, 2014 to 2016.
Right.
But the core motivator was always not to be employed. So I think yeah. So that's been the core motivator. I always hated being told what to do, and that might actually be the wrong message to send out there, to your colleagues as well. But that was my core motivator always. Having said that, I did have a few ideas. So even when teaching, I did like this new thing which was coming up, which was big data. So I made it a point to always keep abreast of new tech. So I did end up doing a lot of courses. In fact, I did a lot of freelance projects as well on big data. I was pretty interested in distributed computing since then. And as soon as there was, this talk about new blockchain technologies coming up, I took it like fish to water. And I actually found our niche there, because there were not really a lot of players in the market, and I knew for a fact that something distributed and decentralized actually had a lot of capability to shape the current ecosystem. And for this very reason, the existing people in the market would not be the first participants to take it up. So you have there the ingredients for something which is disruptive and something which is not going to be taken up by the existing people there as well. Right. So I think choosing blockchain was the right thing for us to do at that time. And yeah, so we just took it up by projects. It was me to begin. Then I got a co-founder as well. And yeah, so it's been that way since. But yeah, I'll just say that the core motivator for me was that I didn't want to for the job. So the one thing that so again, coming from a chemical engineering background, so I did an IDD at IIT Roorkee. It was chemical engineering and MBA, so 5-year course. So I did a few internships at chemical plants, and having done those internships, I knew for a fact that I didn't want to become a chemical engineer. So yeah, that was the core motivator. Naukri nahi karni. Yeah.
Sir, believe me, I've read it in multiple surveys online that is one of the major factors that motivates people to start a venture. And we're really glad that you decided to do so as well, and you're changing the world and making a drastic change in the world itself. So now, sir, like you mentioned, you took the road less traveled with blockchain. So what were some of the challenges that you faced initially?
Challenges of all time. In fact, there are challenges, again, so these are challenges which I will not say are, again, there are some challenges which are related to blockchain, but then I'll say there are challenges which are systemic to the ecosystem in general, right? So, एक जो major challenge जो है is, you are a vendor, you're a small company, you want to raise an invoice because you're burning cash, right? You're burning cash, you don't really have a great runway, and you need the next invoice to be cleared. And unfortunately, I'll say every large corporate that you work with is going to squeeze you.
Right.
So that is the single biggest demotivator out there. And I think this is one key area which the Indian ecosystem has to really work on. I don't think we run a very ethical business ecosystem, and these are very strong words. And I know it will have repercussions here or there or somewhere, but I think we don't really run a very ethical ecosystem. Every single large corporate that you work with is going to find ways to delay your invoices, right? So it's like the bigger fish eats the smaller fish, and at the end of it, an unfunded startup gets squeezed for all their money. So this is the one biggest problem, and again, not a blockchain problem, right?
Right.
So you could be a tech startup, you could be a fintech startup, an agri-tech startup, or a non-tech startup, right? The same thing across the board. You have an invoice that you want to get cleared, and the guy who's going to clear that invoice is going to take their own sweet time sitting over it, and then they're going to make excuses. And yeah, I think the things are pretty bad on this front. The government has done some good work as far as MSME payments are concerned. They have some regulations in place as to how quickly invoices are supposed to be cleared, but they don't really work in practice. None of the regulations actually works in practice. Again, getting certifications is tough. Just getting your registration certificate is tough, or for that matter, any kind of registration certificate. You try to get it, it's just tough.
Right.
So that's why they say if you build a business in India and if you build a successful business in India, you can succeed everywhere. And this is just the cash flow, right? So the margins are pretty thin. I mean, I think we actually operate in one of the better areas as far as industry is concerned in India, because again, even as startups go, I think fintech startups are actually primed to be at the forefront of leading in terms of profits or revenues, because of our clientele.
Right.
But even there, the profit margins are actually pretty slim. So there are those challenges, and then you have other challenges. Technology has its own breakneck pace, and the incumbent people in the market don't really want to adopt it too quickly, right? So nobody wants to be the first sacrificial lamb. Let's just say it that way. People want their competitors to adopt something, and if they are making some noise, and then there will be people rushing to adopt it as well. So there are those challenges, and I think it's true of every single market out there.
Right.
For blockchain, I think the one specific challenge that we've faced in India, at least, is this reluctance on the part of people to try to experiment and just think of it as a SaaS offering, and not try to build their own network. Every single bank that I've talked to, they want to build their own network. They want to build their own blockchain. And that just doesn't work. I just say, we have a lot of people who think there are ways in which technology can be utilized or harnessed, and it just doesn't work that way. So yeah, so it's everything. So people are a problem, cash is a problem, tech is a problem, regulation is a problem, everything is a problem.
And so
उसके ऊपर सबसे बड़ा problem है क्या कहते हैं कि you don't even have, okay, education भी problem है. Yeah, you try to get decent people from the market, and you always find that problem है. You try to get engineers and you find that 4 years in college people have just been wasting time and they are no good. And again very harsh words, but I think I can just go out, hire some 12 pass guy and engineer, and I'll get the same output as freshers from either of them. So yeah, some problem. Everything is a problem. Funding की तो बात ही नहीं की मैंने.
And sir, we would like to salute you for overcoming so many problems and turning your venture successful. And
उसको बाहर भी चढ़ते हैं, वो तो एक अलग problem. That's a problem.
So that is a common problem for everyone. And speaking of common problems for everyone, how has COVID-19 been for you?
I say as a company, we've put it together very well. So I like to tell my co-founder that that productivity has pretty much remained the same for us as a company. लोग पहले भी काम नहीं करते थे, कोविड के बाद का टाइम में भी काम नहीं करते, so it's all the same. Having said that, I think COVID के कारण tech companies in general have not really fared that badly, because again you can just work at home, right? So all you need is a decent internet connection and a machine. All our systems are connected to the cloud. In fact, all our secure systems are connected to client locations through VPNs. So we even have private secure networks to access their infra. So as far as that is concerned, I think we've done okay. There have been issues as far as regular team interaction is concerned. So yeah, I think that as a founder, I would like my team to be more close knit than we've been able to do over the last, it's now close to 1 year, right? So I think since March 2020, we haven't really seen our office. So and the entire 60 people at Arena, they've been working remotely. So it does lead to some kind of fragmentation in the team, and it also leads to some unhealthy work practices, right? So if you are, and again, I blame myself for it also often, because I am guilty of asking my developers at 9 in the evening or 10 in the evening, or 10 actually is sleeping time, by the way, at 10 at night to to deploy some new version of a code or make some changes here and there. And yeah, so I think it's leading to some bad working practices as well out there. But it's something that we have to live with as well, because a lot of the work that we do is pretty much dictated what the clients want. And the clients' deadlines and timelines and working hours have also changed because of all this. So yeah, so it's a combination of good and bad. For me, it's like I said, पहले भी काम नहीं करते, अभी भी नहीं करते, so it's been the same almost.
Right, sir. And sir, our next question is, we're like about only 9-10 days away from the budget, and so what do you think that the government would do, or what are you hoping for specifically in the tech startup field, or something that you might get or the government might offer?
Okay, so I think and I really hope this video doesn't go public or anything. So the first thing that you need to do if you want to run a startup is leave hope at the door, right? So I have never hoped for anything from any government, right? And I think this comes from having read Aesop's fables as a child. So there's this one very beautiful story about this well of frogs, and the frogs, they want a king and they don't have a king, and then they go to Jupiter and ask for a king, and Jupiter sends them a log, and the log makes a huge noise as it crashes into water but does nothing. They go back to Jupiter again, and Jupiter then next sends in a goldfish, and the goldfish looks very pretty, moves around, breathes a lot, does nothing. And the frogs are disappointed. They go back again, ask Jupiter to send a very proactive, hard-working king. And the next day, Jupiter sends it down a crane, and the crane eats every single frog out there. Which actually is a great lesson for every startup out there, because you can hope for a more proactive regime, you can hope for a more proactive regulator or a government or better budgets, but the only thing it's going to do for you is create things which are going to be difficult for you to manage. So yeah, I don't hope for anything. Again, if you ask me, the one thing that I can really hope for is zero corporate taxation. The same on the same lines as it is for agricultural income. But yeah, it's just hope, right? So I know it's never going to happen. Obviously, unless I pay some dharna at the gates of the capital. But yeah, like I said, it's pipe dreams, but it's never going to happen.
Right, sir. And sir, we just have a few rapid fire questions for you. So I'll ask you questions and you have to answer the first thing that comes to mind. So as an entrepreneur, who do you look up to?
Elon Musk.
Right. And why, sir?
He wants to go to Mars. And that's exactly what we are trying to do here, running a startup in India.
Wonderful example, sir. So Bitcoin or conventional money?
Conventional money.
Why, sir?
Okay, so I'll actually say Bitcoin for now, conventional money when Bitcoin goes to zero.
That's a wonderful approach, sir. And would you classify yourself as a early riser or a morning or a late owl?
What is sleep?
Wonderful answer, sir. Again, and since everything is now going online, what are your views about online education or online tech startups that are in the market?
I've heard a lot. I've seen a lot of memes, and a lot of them are about this one giant unicorn out there. And I feel that there are gullible enough people who will pay for such stuff. But I also feel there are great startups that you can always emulate. So yeah, I actually have mixed feelings about this.
Right, sir. And I think that is all the questions that we have. And thank you so much for so wonderful answers. And finally, sir, what is so our key demographic is about 21 to 25-year-old students. So what would your advice for them be as students in general and as future entrepreneurs?
I think I actually lost my 5 years at college, and I would really want them back. So, and again, I think this is primarily because of the way we are raised as children. You know, there's this typical dialogue. अभी तो पढ़ लो, बात को तो ऐश है, JEE clear कर लो, बात को तो ऐश है, engineering कर लो, बात को तो ऐश है, नौकरी कर लो, बात को तो ऐश है. I think we have to be very clear. वो ऐश कभी नहीं like I said, you should leave that. The days when I work are the days when I'm the most dispirited, and those are the days that I actually feel very despondent. So hoping for chill wali zindagi is actually inviting trouble for yourself, and I think that's exactly where I feel today that I lost my 4 or 5 odd years at college. You really need to be very focused on what you want to do, and you have to excel at that. And unfortunately, Indian colleges don't really promote that, right? So I come from an IIT, and the way we worked was horrible. I mean, you look at our semester examinations. I mean, they've been there for 25 years. I'm pretty sure, if my progeny happens to go to IIT Roorkee, in another 25 to 30 odd years, they'll see the exact same questions in their examinations as I found them. Pedagogy has not really changed. What has to change is the way we ourselves want to approach this, right? And again, so there's not just dark clouds. There are also silver linings. So there are young kids out there who are very bright and they are very focused. I recently, have come in touch with this young bright child. So he's very focused. So he's topper in his class. Doesn't want to study too much, but is hyper focused on creating the next big fintech, and will do just about anything to do it. Right? And I think that's exactly what the approach should be.
Right, sir.
Fix your mind on something, and you do whatever it takes to do that. Right? You study finance, you study economics, you study coding, you study everything. Right? You basically do everything that you need to do to get there. And I think that's true if you want to have just a steady, stable job, or if you want to become an entrepreneur as well. You should, I think, if you are good at something, you should be doing it and not just thinking it.
Right, sir.
That's the one thing which is true always.
And thank you, sir, for such wonderful thoughts. And with that, we'd like to conclude the session for today, leaving our viewers with a lot to think about and a lot more to do. So, and I would like to thank you once again for taking out time from your busy schedule. So thank you so much, sir, for such a wonderful session and interacting with us.
Thanks a lot for having me as well. You guys take care.
It's a pleasure, sir. Thank you.